48 hours. Two major national announcements, one unresolved contract, and the Indiana Fever have not said a single word publicly. Sophie Cunningham just pulled off something that almost no WNBA player in history has attempted, and she did it while her own team is still deciding whether they want to keep her. A broadcaster deal with USA Network, a Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition feature alongside one of the most recognizable athletes in women's sports. Two brand-defining moves in less than 2 days, executed with the kind of precision that tells you this was not spontaneous. This was a strategy, and you need to understand exactly where that strategy came from, because it leads directly back to one person, Caitlin Clark. What you're watching unfold with Sophie Cunningham is not just one player building her personal brand. It is the first visible wave of the Caitlin Clark effect rippling through the entire Indiana Fever roster. When Clark arrived in Indianapolis in 2024, she did not just change the team's record. She rewrote the economic value of every single player wearing that Fever uniform. And now, in January of 2025, Sophie Cunningham is cashing in on that new valuation, whether the Fever's front office is ready for it or not. The question this video is going to answer is not whether Sophie Cunningham is committed to basketball. The real question is whether Indiana's front office understands what Caitlin Clark's arrival actually did to their roster's market value, and whether they are prepared to pay for it. If you have been tracking this situation and you can already see what is happening beneath the surface, hit that like button right now, because we are about to connect some dots that most channels are completely missing on this story. Let's establish the timeline first, because the sequence of events matters enormously. On January 6, 2025, USA Network Basketball announced Sophie Cunningham as a contributor for their WNBA coverage throughout the entire 2025 season. This is not a one-off guest appearance. This is a contracted broadcaster role, steady income, on-camera experience, and direct positioning inside the league's most heavily invested new broadcast partnership. USA Network, which is NBC's cable sports outlet, is putting real money into WNBA coverage for 2025. They chose Sophie Cunningham as one of their credible voices. Then, less than 12 hours later, the Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition 2026 announcement drops. Sophie in Fort Myers, photographed alongside Napheesa Collier, one of the legitimate faces of the WNBA, and sprinter Melissa Jefferson. Three elite athletes at the absolute peak of their respective sports, all building brands that extend far beyond their primary careers, all appearing in what is arguably the most culturally significant sports media crossover in American sports history. And here's what makes the timing explosive. The Indiana Fever sent Sophie a core qualifying offer on January 6th, the exact same day as the USA Network announcement. The organization has until February to finalize their position. No public statement followed, no social media acknowledgement of Sophie's announcements, no signal whatsoever of how they intend to proceed. Complete organizational silence. That silence is telling you something. Here is the context that most coverage is burying entirely. The WNBA's maximum salary in 2025 sits at $241,984. That ceiling is reserved for players at the absolute elite tier: Aja Wilson, Breanna Stewart. Sophie Cunningham, even after a strong 2024 campaign, is realistically looking at somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 if she re-signs with Indiana. The salary cap for the entire Fever roster is just $1.46 million, 12 players splitting less than $1.5 million. Now hold that number against what Caitlin Clark alone generated for the Fever franchise. Last season, the team averaged 1.18 million viewers per game on traditional television. That is not counting streaming. Clark's debut drew 2.1 million viewers on ESPN. The playoff game against Connecticut pulled 1.8 million on ABC. Those are mainstream American sports TV numbers, primetime network numbers. The Fever became a national product in a single season. Their franchise value grew. Their sponsorship leverage grew. Their media rights conversation changed entirely. But Sophie Cunningham's salary? Still tied to the old economic model. The new CBA does not kick in until 2026. This is the structural trap that Caitlin Clark's arrival accidentally created, and it is the trap that Sophie Cunningham is navigating in real time right in front of us. The Clark effect inflated every Fever player's market value. Their visibility, their social media reach, their sponsor appeal all shifted upward. But the league's compensation structure has not caught up. Sophie recognized this gap before most players in the league did, and instead of waiting for anyone to fix it, she went out and built the fix herself. The USA Network deal is not just a media gig, it is a parallel income stream that bypasses the salary cap entirely. The Sports Illustrated feature is not just a modeling contract, it is mainstream cultural visibility that opens doors no basketball contract can open. Sophie is now operating simultaneously in two economies: the old WNBA economy, where her value is capped by outdated league structure, and the new one, where the Caitlin Clark effect has made her a marketable national figure with genuine independent brand equity. And here is what nobody is fully articulating. When Sophie describes the Sports Illustrated feature as probably one of the most empowering things I have ever done, and talks about demonstrating that a woman can be beautiful and strong simultaneously, she is not just describing a photo shoot, she is describing her entire career strategy right now. She is demonstrating that a WNBA player can refuse to be defined by a single economic dimension, can refuse to be entirely dependent on whatever a team decides to offer her, can go out and build parallel value structures that give her real negotiating power. Pay close attention to the company Sophie is keeping in that shoot. Napheesa Collier is not simply a talented basketball player. She is a founding owner of Unrivaled, the first women's basketball league to offer revenue sharing to players. She is one of the most strategically sophisticated thinkers in the WNBA. The fact that Sophie is standing next to her at this particular moment, in a feature of this cultural magnitude, is not coincidental. These are athletes who understand that the off-court game runs parallel to everything that happens on the floor. The Fever sent that qualifying offer without fanfare, without a public statement of intent, without any acknowledgement of Sophie's contributions to what became a nationally watched franchise. That is a negotiating posture. Sophie responded to it in the loudest possible way, not by talking to the press, but by proving through action that she does not need Indiana to define what she is worth. The organization's silence in the face of that proof is the most revealing detail of this entire story, and what it reveals is this: the Indiana Fever's front office may not yet fully understand what the Caitlin Clark effect has done to the economic calculus of everyone on their roster, because Sophie Cunningham just changed the terms of the negotiation, and they have until February to figure out whether they are playing by the new rules or the old ones. Let me know in the comments right now. Do you think the Indiana Fever's front office fully grasps what they are sitting on with Sophie Cunningham at this moment? Drop your read on the situation below, because the organizational response to all of this is going to reveal exactly how sophisticated their thinking actually is heading into 2025. Let's go deeper into what the USA Network broadcaster role actually represents for Sophie's leverage position, because this goes considerably further than most coverage is acknowledging. NBC made a deliberate, calculated decision to bring Sophie in as a contributor. Networks do not make those calls randomly. They hire analysts who can attract viewers, who have established relationships with current players, and who can provide perspective that casual fans cannot find anywhere else. Sophie checks every one of those boxes, and she checks them specifically because of what the Caitlin Clark effect did to the Fever's national profile over a single season. Before Clark arrived, Sophie Cunningham was a recognizable figure to WNBA hardcore fans. After one season playing alongside the most watched WNBA player in the history of the league, on a nationally televised team with historic viewership numbers, she became someone that casual sports fans had actually encountered. USA Network is not just hiring Sophie Cunningham the basketball player, they are hiring Sophie Cunningham the on-court presence from the most watched WNBA franchise in the country. Clark's visibility transferred partially but meaningfully to every starter on that Fever team. The broadcaster role is Sophie monetizing that transferred visibility before it depreciates. That is an insight Indiana's front office may not have fully factored into their qualifying offer calculation. There is a broader CBA angle buried in this story that deserves direct attention. The WNBA is currently in an unprecedented transition window. League viewership and franchise valuations are growing faster than at any moment in the organization's history, driven substantially by Clark's 2024 debut season. But player compensation is still governed by a collective bargaining agreement negotiated before that growth was visible or measurable. Players like Sophie are operating in a market where their real-world commercial value has potentially doubled or tripled, while their contract ceiling has not moved. The new CBA does not restructure anything until 2026, which means every veteran on the Fever roster is caught in this gap for at least another full season. Sophie is not the only Fever player navigating this. Consider Lexi Hull in the gym every day this offseason, working on her handles, locked into pure preparation mode. That approach is exactly right for a player focused on elevating her on-court game. But Lexi's market visibility, her name recognition, her sponsor appeal have also been elevated by association with Clark. Every player who shared that Fever bench during the 2024 season is sitting on brand value they did not have in 2023. The difference between Sophie and most of her teammates right now is that Sophie moved first before we continue. If this kind of analysis is why you keep coming back to this channel, consider hitting that join button below. Your support is what makes it possible to keep going this deep on stories that other channels are skipping past entirely. Now let's address the tension that Indiana's front office has to genuinely reckon with. There is a legitimate question about whether Sophie's divided attention, basketball preparation on one side, broadcaster commitments, and brand partnerships on the other, affects her on-court performance in 2025. The Fever need players locked into a championship run. That is a real organizational concern, not a fabricated one. But here is the counter-argument, and it is a strong one. Sophie's off-court brand work directly generates attention for the Indiana Fever franchise. Her USA Network appearances will reference her Fever affiliation constantly throughout the season. Her Sports Illustrated visibility brings the Fever name into cultural spaces that traditional WNBA coverage never reaches. A player with that kind of mainstream presence is not just a basketball asset, she is a brand ambassador. And in the post-Clark WNBA, where franchise visibility translates directly to sponsorship dollars and broadcast negotiation leverage, that has real organizational value. The smart read for Indiana is not, do we want a player this focused on off-court ventures, but rather, how do we structure a deal that incentivizes Sophie to stay, while acknowledging that her total value to this franchise exceeds what we can fit into a salary cap line. If you know someone who follows the Fever closely and needs to understand what is actually happening with this roster situation, share this video with them right now. This contract situation is going to shape Indiana's entire veteran management approach heading into the Clark era. Here is the most important insight buried in all of this, and it goes far beyond Sophie Cunningham individually. The WNBA's entire compensation model has historically been built on the assumption that players need the league more than the league needs any individual player. That assumption kept salaries suppressed for decades. Players had limited alternatives. European leagues existed, but the American market, the sponsorships, the cultural relevance, the mainstream media access was only reliably available through WNBA contracts. Teams held the leverage. Players accepted the terms. Caitlin Clark's arrival challenged that calculus at the foundation. Her 2024 season proved that WNBA basketball in the right market, with the right player, generates mainstream American sports viewership at a scale the league had never seen. That proof of concept elevated every player associated with her, specifically every Fever player, into a new tier of cultural visibility. Sophie Cunningham's dual announcement in 48 hours is the first concrete evidence that a WNBA player, empowered by Clark-driven national exposure, can build a parallel economic life that genuinely and measurably reduces her dependence on her playing contract. She has a broadcaster salary coming in through USA Network regardless of what Indiana offers. She has a Sports Illustrated feature generating brand and sponsorship opportunities on its own track. She has demonstrated, through market response alone, that her commercial value exists independently of whatever the Fever decide to put on the table. When Sophie's announcement dropped, connected voices inside the WNBA world reacted immediately, not like a player announcing a side project, but like someone announcing the launch of a media enterprise, because that is effectively what she is building. That is genuinely new ground for the WNBA. The post-Clark era is producing players who have real options, real leverage, and real alternatives to simply accepting whatever a team offers. Indiana's front office silence in response to Sophie's announcements is not just about one contract negotiation. It is about figuring out how to operate in a league where the leverage dynamics have fundamentally shifted. The Fever have until February to answer. Sophie Cunningham already has. She did not hold a press conference. She did not make demands publicly. She let USA Network and Sports Illustrated answer for her in the loudest possible way at the exact moment Indiana sent her a qualifying offer. However this negotiation resolves, it will set the template for how the Fever approach every veteran contract in the Caitlin Clark era. Underpay Sophie and watch her walk, and you signal to every other player on the roster that the organization has not actually internalized what Clark's arrival means for their individual value. Pay fairly and structure a deal that acknowledges the new reality, and you establish yourself as a franchise that can attract and retain the talent you need to compete around the most marketable player in women's basketball history. The Caitlin Clark effect is not just a viewership statistic. It is not just a jersey sales number. It is a fundamental restructuring of what it means to play alongside her, to share her franchise, to benefit from the national attention she generates. Sophie Cunningham just made that restructuring visible in a way that cannot be ignored. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because we are not close to done with this story. In our next video, we are going into the full picture of how the Fever's off-season decisions, every contract offer, every roster move, every organizational signal will determine whether Indiana can build a genuine championship contender around Clark for the long term, or whether they will watch their supporting cast leverage the Clark effect and walk out the door one by one. That one is coming very soon, and you do not want to be behind on it. We will see you there.